Isn't this the perfect weather to talk about cozy fantasy? Because once I get back from my walk, I'll be having a very cozy afternoon with hot chocolate and cinnamon cookies. I'm already looking forward to it. Hey, I'm Father Roderick. I'm a priest and I'm an author and I write fantasy. And today I would like to share with you some of the cozy fantasy tropes, like the genre-defining characteristics of cozy fantasy that inspired my own cozy fantasy novel, Advent of Dragons. This is a novel that I finished writing in December of 2025. It was a 1-month project. I have never written cozy fantasy before, but I did read cozy fantasy. And the two most memorable books that I've read was The House in the Cerulean Sea and Legends Lattes, probably the book that defined the genre. And there were a lot of elements in those two books that I have tried to integrate as much as possible in my own cozy fantasy. Before I start sharing these inspirations for my own book, I would like to talk a little bit about why cozy fantasy is so much on the rise right now. And unless you've been living under a rock, I'm sure that you are aware of the popularity of the genre. I think together with romantasy, it's one of the best-selling genres right now, and I'm not surprised, and here's why. And I think actually there are some reasons that these two genres are so popular, and I think it all has to do with the world in which we live today. Many people are scared of the situation in the world. There's a lot of instability, there's a lot of unpredictability, and let's face it, let's be real, there's also a lot of very harsh behavior, not just by people, but also by those in power. There's a lot of violence, a lot of indifference would be kind of the least troublesome thing that is happening, but there's just open hostility towards groups of people. There's just a lot to be worried about, and I think stories have always helped us to deal with difficult situations. This is one of the things that Tolkien writes about in his book on fairy tales. He says the fundamental value of fairy tales, so imaginary worlds, fantasy books, is that they allow us to dream about a different world from the world in which we live. It gives us perspective, it gives us hope. Now, of course, it's fantasy, it's imagination, but imagination is always the start of transformation. If I didn't imagine first a story... Okay, sorry about that. My phone got a little slippery because of the snow. It just dropped from my hands. I'm also carrying gloves, so the grip on my phone is not as good as it used to be, or as it normally is. Anyway, so if I didn't first imagine a story, then I would never write it. So every book that I've written last year started with imagining something. And yes, those stories, like my Advent of Dragons story, they are about fictional people in fictional worlds, but they do talk about real needs that we have and real relatable problems and aspirations. And I think that is the function of stories today as well. We need fantasy, we need fiction, especially when the world is dark, because it helps us to dream about a different way of shaping this world. And because you are reading about people that are actually doing this, the heroes in the stories, you identify with them, you follow their choices, and then maybe that inspires you to make similar choices. The true magic, I think, in fantasy is how it impacts us in our real life. And when people say magic doesn't exist, I disagree. And I think magic often starts with magical tales. But the true magic is the transformation of the world through our actions, based on those stories that we love so much. I think I'm going to hold the phone with my two hands because I feel that it's still a bit slippery in my hands. So here are a few elements that I loved writing into my cozy fantasy book. The most important one for me was the transformation of the protagonist. And what I like about the genre is that it is kind of the inverse of what you would normally do in, for instance, in epic fantasy. In epic fantasy, think of the Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit. It starts in very kind of day-to-day life. A hobbit lives in a hole, organizes a birthday party, and that's it, you know? And then the real adventure is in the big world, fighting dragons, stealing treasure, facing orcs, and all that. But in cozy fantasy, it's the inverse. You start usually from the perspective of someone who's been very busy, maybe even very successful, and then steps into this simple life. And all of a sudden, all the stakes are lowered instead of raised, and they become very simple. And I think that appeals to us because sometimes in a world that is very complicated, in a life that is very rushed, we feel that same desire of, if only I could be a hobbit. Who hasn't thought that every once in a while? I wish I could live in the Shire, and just the only worry would be what I'm going to serve the dwarves whenever they knock on my door. Let's see. Let me go this way. So, what I did in my story was to take one of the characters of my Dragon Patrol book series, because I'm developing a series based on that. So it's someone who has been actually kind of a police officer riding a dragon in a big city, but she gets chronically ill, and for the winter she returns to her grandmother in a small village, and she has to find new purpose in her life. And it's the total opposite of the kind of life that she used to live. And we discover over the course of the events that previous life that she valued so much and that initially she misses so much was actually the kind of life that got her sick. And in this new world, she has to find healing, and she finds healing. And I hope it's a bit of a life lesson for me as well, because as a writer, you're the first reader of your book. But it reminds me that I often measure myself or my success or my happiness by using productivity as a criterion. How many books have I written? How many videos do I put out? How much work do I do? And what I learned from writing cozy fantasy is to reevaluate my life and my life priorities and discover that what is truly important is not my usefulness. It's much more in friendships. And that brings me to the second trope of cozy fantasy. Something that's always very important, especially in Legends and Lattes and the house in the Cerulean Sea. It's the theme of found family. So oftentimes, these former heroes, like the ones in Legends and Lattes, who I think used to be regular fantasy adventurers, when they start over in a small town, they now have to, let me see where I go. The problem is with the snow, the paths are now invisible. So I hope I don't get lost. So because they're in a new environment, they have to rebuild their social environment as well. And along the way, they make friends, and we as readers also get to know these new friends. So in Legends and Lattes, there's around the cafe that they open, there are some employees that join them. There are some townspeople, some regular side characters that appear, and we get to know them over time. And in the sequels, even better. And that makes us feel, as a reader, that we're part of that family. And that's something that we long for, because in a world that is complicated and scary, what do we most long for is people that we can trust. People that love us for who we are, that don't judge us, that certainly are not a threat to us. And so that element, same thing in the house in the Cerulean Sea. It's this found family. There are a couple of children. One of them is even the Antichrist. And yet they all become part of this family. They're all accepted. without exception for who they are. And I try to do that in my story as well. My main character, Katie, used to have friends in the big city. Those were her team members. We get to know them in my Dragon Patrol book. But now in this small town, she initially thinks everybody hates her because she was the city girl. She was the daughter of two teachers. She never really felt part of the village because her parents weren't farmers. And so at first she experiences the town as very hostile, and she feels literally, well, not literally, but she feels like a fish out of water. But then over time she meets former classmates, the local parish priest, all sorts of people. Her grandmother is very instrumental in this, bringing a new family to surround her and to help her. And because she's chronically ill, she has to rely on them. She can't do it all by herself anymore. And that is where the friendship really starts to shine, because it's a common effort. It's no longer the hero who solves everything by his or herself. No, it is reaching the goal of the book is a team effort. It's something you do as a family. And writing that was fantastic. I now feel, and I have this with some television series as well, where you follow a number of friends. I don't know, Big Bang Theory or Young Sheldon or what is it, even Friends. You get to know these people and you feel like it's kind of like a remote fictional family, and they help you because of all these different perspectives. Helps you think about your own life and your own choices. It's just, sometimes books and TV shows can be like that. It feels like you're visiting friends and family. Okay, here's a small path that goes this way. Looks like only rabbits go here, but I'll give it a try. So the found family trope is, I think, is it's one of the things I love the most, adding to the story. And then, of course, you've got the low stakes, very important. I was tempted when I started writing to use the same kind of stakes and the same kind of techniques that I've used in my other novels. And so at one point I had like a really evil mastermind and his minions trying to frustrate my protagonist. And then I looked at it, I was like, no, this does not work. The stakes are too high. For cozy fantasy, the stakes need to be relatable without scaring you. So I kept it much closer to home. There are some problems. There is even a bad guy to a certain extent, but it's never frightening you. It never feels like, oh, this is an impossible thing. This is never going to work. You don't want the reader to be scared or stressed out, because why would they be reading cozy fantasy? They can get stressed out by the news. So they come to cozy fantasy in order to feel safe. And that's what I hope to make the reader feel. Speaking of the bad guy, that's another big difference. So in The House in the Cerulean Sea and Legends Lattes, there are some people that are a threat to the low stakes goals of the protagonist or protagonists. But oftentimes, or more often than not, hold on, what's happening here? Let me go back. Yeah, for some reason, I think the snow is messing around with my phone and it switched apps. Oftentimes those antagonists are redeemable. And cozy fantasy takes more time, I think, than other books or other genres to explain why people do what they do. And also, when it comes to bad guys, why they have this behavior. And so when I was thinking about, who's going to be the antagonist in my story, I, from the get-go, wanted to create someone who, first of all, isn't really bad. It's not just pure evil. That person believes that he is doing the right thing. It's just that he doesn't realize what his actions are doing to other people. So it's someone who's genuinely trying to do the right thing, but he still has to learn. And once he discovers what he's been doing, then there is a room for a conversion and for more insight and for redemption. And so my antagonist has a redemption arc. It's not sappy or sugary, but it at the end, there are no antagonists left. And that for me was also typical for this kind of storytelling, is to make sure that at the end there's always hope for everyone in the story, even for the antagonist. This is what I loved about The House in the Cerulean Sea, is this kid, the Antichrist. But it turns out that even the Antichrist or the Antichrist can become part of a family, can be accepted. And so redemption as the core value is also something that we want, we hope for the world. We desire people to be merciful, and we have this dream that in the end, even the bad guys can maybe change. And it's important to always believe that and to always hope for that. Because otherwise it starts to affect our view of people in general. There are very few people, I think, that are truly, truly inherently evil. Even people that we label as great sinners or criminals. Whoops. It's getting very dangerous here. You always have to ask yourself, how did they get to this point? What brought them to this point? Who else influenced the story of that person? And it doesn't mean that you have to absolve anything that they do. No, you can absolutely say, well, this is evil and this is good. But you always have to separate it from the story of the person who is committing those acts. That person, and that's a very deep belief that I have, even that person might be redeemed. And we can always keep that hope for other people, and we have to also always believe that we ourselves, even if we mess up, even if we do stupid things or worse, we too can always find redemption. There's always hope. That is, I think, why cozy fantasy is so successful today, so popular, because that's something that we want to believe for ourselves and for the world in which we live. I'm going to keep it at that. There are many other aspects of cozy fantasy, I think, that explain why the genre is so popular. If you want to read my story, it's available for free, the entire book. So you can find it on my Substack, fatherroderick.substack.com. And if you would like to read it in the form of an ebook or even print it as a book, then I have good news. One of my New Year's resolutions is to finally start publishing my books. And so I will let you know, if you're subscribed to my newsletter on Substack, I will let you know when those books are available in print or in ebook version. I'd love to hear what you think of cozy fantasy, and if you've read any cozy fantasy books that you want to recommend to other people. This is one of the fun things of this community, is we learn from others what is worth our time and what is not. So by all means, share it in the comments, give this video a like, and make sure that you are subscribed to this channel. I will talk to you soon. Happy New Year and happy reading. Take care.